Hi, I'm Scott Nash. My topic is on rooftop solar, particularly whether or not rooftop solar is the clean energy source we should be focusing on going forward. As we invest more and more into clean energy, should rooftop solar be something we focus on? In recent years, rooftop solar has really grown in popularity. In the last 3 years alone, 16 local governments have approved energy standards for new housing development, including in 2020, the California Building Standards Commission unanimously approved a mandate that requires all newly built California homes statewide to include solar panels. So, any new homes built in California have to have a certain amount of their electricity generated by solar panels. California is the first U.S. state to do this. Also, over the last decade, rooftop solar subsidies have been a major push of local and state governments as well as federal. So even if they're not mandating anything, they are still pushing for subsidies and incentives to try to get people to build rooftop solar because it's a very big deal to them. And there are some advantages to rooftop solar, of course. Solar energy is one of the most efficient forms of renewable clean energy, and it's available every day of the year. And by producing the electricity on the property or on the rooftop, long power transmission isn't necessary, so less power lines are needed, and you don't lose that power efficiency through the long transmission. It reduces the homeowner's electricity bill, and eventually it can lead to a return on investment on them, which can save them money. On an especially efficient system without a battery, homeowners could even sell power back to the grid and make money off of it. Meanwhile, with a battery, homeowners may be able to live completely grid free. With the rooftop solar mandate I mentioned, how homes are estimated to use 53% less energy, and greenhouse emissions for the state would be cut 700,000 metric tons. Meanwhile, there are some disadvantages as well. For example, why 700,000 metric tons is significant, the state reduced over 440 million. So this means that we're only really reducing greenhouse emissions by less than 1%, and homes only account for 7% of the state's overall emissions. So it's still significant that we're decreasing greenhouse emissions by almost 1%. But when you look at how much it can, for example, raise the cost of all housing, especially affordable housing in a state where we're in an affordable housing crisis, you have to start questioning whether it's worth it. Also, it requires changes in building designs, requires large battery banks often, and homeowners have to maintain them. It can also disrupt aesthetic quality in the neighborhoods. It can cause PV glare, though that's mostly been reduced with new solar panels, so they don't have much PV glare anymore, but it's still brought up very often. And it can cause inequalities in a state that already has one of the highest income inequalities in the nation. Many people might question how can solar panels cause inequalities, which I will talk about next. Basically, for solar panels, there's all kinds of incentives and subsidies that the government offer for them. And the only people that are able to take advantage of these incentives and subsidies are the people that are able to afford solar, which usually are the relatively more wealthier residents. Meanwhile, poor individuals, by paying their taxes, are paying for those incentives and subsidies that the wealthier are using. Some wealthy individuals are even known to really abuse solar subsidies in order to get tax cuts. Also, since solar owners pay less or no utility bill, they're not paying for the energy infrastructure they are very likely using unless they are off the grid. And especially since a lot of times they're selling to the grid during peak hours and buying from the grid at night, they're actually using the grid more than anyone. So they're using the grid and the infrastructure, but since they're not paying a utility bill or paying less of a utility bill, they're not paying for the infrastructure they're using. Meanwhile, the poor are. So this can lead to inequalities. So what are some alternatives? Well, the biggest one to me is utility scale solar. So it still is solar because solar is one of the most efficient clean energies, but it's on a utility scale. So these big solar farms that you've probably seen along the freeway. Some of the advantages are that rather than designing these complicated, expensive, and dangerous racks for rooftops, which usually is the biggest cost with rooftop solars, instead they can build these large racks holding multiple panels, and they're built easily, safely, and much more cheaply. Also, they can easily be designed to track the sun, which makes the solar panels much more efficient. So rather than designing these custom racks for homes, which cost a lot of money, instead they can build these gigantic racks. They can also place these more strategically based on the sun, and they're far easier to connect and design infrastructure for. And instead of the homeowner maintaining them, where they don't really know what they're doing, instead these solar panels are maintained by industrial professionals. Most people will consider this more aesthetically pleasing, though if it's right by your home or if it's on your commute, you might disagree. But usually these are built in low population areas like the desert. And they are 3 times more cost effective than rooftop solar, which both the Brattle Group says, as well as the California Energy Commission. Some of the disadvantages: it does require very large lots of land, and it does lose efficiency in transportation. Since it's not right there on the rooftop, they have to transport that power over power lines, and it does lose some of the power in that way. And some may consider it unsightly, though, like I said, it's usually in low population areas. Now, this is a recent study that came out from, Lazar Ltd. Came out just a month ago, actually, but it's a very significant chart or study in that it's showing the cost of solar compared to conventional like coal and gas. And you can see on the very top there is rooftop residential, which actually is fairly expensive. Meanwhile, 3 down there, you have thin film utility scale, which is very, very cheap. It's almost the cheapest on the graph. The only thing it's got to be is wind. Wind in the perfect scenario can be even better than solar, but it is very tricky to get that scenario. They cost a lot to make. They cost a lot to maintain. They're a lot less aesthetically pleasing seeing giant solar or wind farms, so usually solar is the better way to go, though in some situations wind power can be even more cost effective. Another major thing that came out of the study just recently that actually made some news was that on the left side there is the cost of new building wind and solar, and on the right is maintaining existing conventional generation like coal. And you can see that utility scale solar has actually gotten so cheap now that it's usually considered actually cheaper to build new wind and solar, particularly solar, than it is to continue generating coal and to maintain that and pay for the cost of generating it. So building new solar has actually become cheaper, which is a really big deal, actually. Community shared array programs. So community shared array programs, rather than just building solar farms that just the government has provided to the grid, these are treated very similar to rooftop solars, but they're in the farm. They're in the desert. They're not on top of your roof. What's great about these is basically you pay a subscription to the array service, and you buy a certain portion of their solar farm's capacity, and that will give you credit on your utility bill. So, for example, you would pay a solar array $50, and in return, you get a $70 cut on your utility bill. Ultimately, you're saving $20, and you're investing in solar energy, which is both great. This also allows anyone to invest in solar, whether you rent or if you have a house that you can't put rooftop solar on, which is more than 50% of houses, or if you're lower income, you can still invest. So that removes the inequality factor. And these arrays are far more efficient, cost effective, and lastly, it avoids an increase in housing prices when we're in a crisis. So some examples of community solar opportunities that you might be able to invest in nearby is that they have these, this company Jatton is building some of these nearby, including Sheep Creek Road and El Mirage, which is just above the Cajon Pass, or Foothill Road, which is in the Western Valley, or Utica Avenue, which is in Kettleman City, which isn't too close, but same company. None of these are quite built yet. They're going to be finished next year. And they haven't quite worked out their subscriptions yet, but though they're estimating to charge 70 cents per kilowatt hour with a $6 a month fee, which is very, very cheap for California. The United States average for kilowatt hour cost is only 10.5 cents, but in California, it's 16.7. So you can go from 16 cents per kilowatt hour to 7 cents per kilowatt hour through this program. You can save a lot of money, especially here in California. So these will be built soon. Pretty nearby to us, and that's exactly what these are, is community solar. In conclusion, research by the Brattle Group shows that building solar in large arrays rather than rooftop is half the price, more easily managed, and more widely accessible, and the California Energy Commission, who created the mandate, admits that grid-scale energy production is 3 times more cost-effective. Additionally, rooftop solar will increase the initial cost of homes when California is already in an affordable housing crisis, and will only benefit high-income individuals or families. As the state and the nation continue to push for rooftop solar, we need to stop and ask if it's really the most efficient method and whether the benefits outweigh the consequences. Thank you for watching my presentation.